All right, everyone, welcome. This is DRM Unfiltered, the podcast that dares to go beyond the buzzwords. Get ready to hold some conversations with our experts, clients, and industry leaders transforming capital program delivery. From real world Primavera breakthroughs to game changing strategies and success stories, we're serving unfiltered thoughts that fuel innovation and inspire the future of project controls. No fluff, no filters, just the voices shaping tomorrow. Today's topic is Oracle's value proposition for public sector clients. And I'm glad to welcome Phil Rizzo from Oracle. Phil, why don't you give yourself a little bit of introduction and some background?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Philip Rizzo with Oracle. I've been with Oracle, geez, probably coming up on about 26 years. Started out as an engineer. I think the only thing they wouldn't let me do was write code. It's probably a good thing. But I did go into consulting and services for a while, and then I actually manage a sales team for North American public sector for state and local higher ed and healthcare. And we cover the entire construction and engineering product portfolio. And looking forward to discussing that today.
Perfect. Yeah, today we're diving into a topic that sits at the heart of modernization efforts across government agencies. Oracle's value proposition for public sector clients. Public organizations operate under unique pressures, tight budgets, strict procurement rules, legacy systems, ever-growing demand for transparency and performance. So what does value truly look like in this environment, and how does Oracle position its technology to meet those needs while also supporting long-term transformation? We're sitting down today with Phil. We're going to unpack exactly that. We're going to explore the capabilities, differentiators, real-world outcomes that matter most to public sector leaders that are navigating this complex capital programs and enterprise systems. Our goal is by the end of this conversation that you'll walk away with unfiltered insights and into how Oracle delivers value where it counts and what that means for agencies striving to modernize responsibly and effectively. So with that, Phil, we'll get started. The first question that always comes up is, why is the public sector such an important focus area for Oracle's construction and engineering global business unit?
Hey, great question. Appreciate the question, Dan. It's interesting because if you look at public sector, a lot of times you'll sit there and think, wow, the nature of the product, it's a project management system. So what's its value and what really does it offer into a public sector space? If you really peel back in public sector business overall, I kind of break it down into six plus or minus really effective reasons or factions that really detail why public sector is such a vital focus for Oracle. One is that it's with regard to the product portfolio in general, we go beyond just project management systems. We have to do a lot in that area of complex budgeting, tracking color of money for projects from different budgets, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in some of the further parts of this conversation. But getting back to really my five or six key points in public sector and why it's a vital focus is that it's a significant market size. So sector organizations, whether it's government agencies, transportation authorities, higher ed, even healthcare and utilities, they are consistently among the largest owners and managers of capital projects worldwide. Their investments in infrastructure are paramount, probably second to none. If you look at, an example of a DOT, Department of Transportation, for example, that's a living, breathing ribbon of road. If you ever look at that, or roadways and within each, respective state. So significant market size and the project size are really very solid and big in the public sector world. Those same projects and those same projects within the market can be very complex. And so an item, if I had to look at an item number two, for instance, as to why the vital focus, we have very complex project requirements. And again, I touched on this whole concept of tracking the color of money. There's different budgets and different subcontractors for each thing within, public sector projects. So they can involve really highly complex projects, large budgets, multi-tiered and multifaceted budgets, and even strict regulatory requirements around that. So the complexities around public sector projects are insanely complex. And secondarily, what the impact is on the surface roads during the project completion. So those requirements of those projects can be, three-dimensional if you want to look at it that way. And really a third area as to why public sector is so vitally, important to us is that from a regulatory and compliance needs, government projects, they have to adhere to strict transparency and accountability and even reporting standards. And so our tools really lend help to that fact. And public sector organizations, they can manage and give you the ability to manage documentation, straight documentation, nested documentation, secure documentation based on contractors and subcontractors, and even enforce compliance. So that's really critical. And also enable all at the same time to enable transparent project governance. So regulatory compliance and needs a really key item for us. Third and probably a fourth topic here in why it's a vital area for us is that driving modernization and efficiency. You kind of look at public sector projects and you think, wow, how do they drive modernization? That's sort of a slow process, but it's slow for a reason because of the last three areas I mentioned. But companies that support the public sector space are driving and helping public sector organizations responsibly drive towards modernization and efficiency. I'll give you an example is that there's another bridge project we've been working on, and is that they have the customer, the Department of Transportation that we're working with has an older bridge that spans a river. And what they're doing, instead of tearing that bridge down, they're going to retrofit it and modernize it for light rail and then build a secondary bridge next door to it. That's going to take road traffic. So it's going to alleviate the traffic between the modernization of light rail, but it's also going to expand the existing infrastructure for roadway. Very cool project that's underway there. And so all of these things really tie into, what I sort of do, commonly refer to as the underpinning of all of it is the social and economic impact of these large projects. Public sector organizations, if you look at it from a standpoint of what they do from a social and economic standpoint, is that, a successful public sector construction project can really drive new infrastructure and have wide-reaching positive impacts on communities. I'm based in Seattle, and we've adopted light rail pretty aggressively. And so we are seeing a lot of, railway and also roadway support, expansion into, hooking up the airport to the downtown region, Seattle, to really streamline and offset traffic for the roadways. And so those can have a really social and economic impact as well. And also, all of this is really another underpinning of all of this in public sector space is that there's really long-term strategic relationships that are built with customers in terms of the public sector space. We have a lot of long-term relationships there from both technology providers, services providers, and as well as other software applications outside of the Oracle, construction engineering ecosystem that support initiatives for public sector customers as well. So hopefully that sort of shed some light, Dan, on our impact and why we see public sector space as such a vital space for us.
It is. It's only growing. It's not getting any smaller, which kind of leads to what the next question would be is what challenges do you see public sector organizations most often underestimate when they're looking at modernizing their project controls and PMIS type environments?
Yeah, and I would see that there's several areas that are probably underestimated, if you will, that make us specifically uniquely suited in the Oracle Construction Engineering product solution set, commonly referred to as Primavera. That's sort of the umbrella term for the product set. But all of those products that I think make us uniquely suited and where customers we see them underestimate the complexities here is that project and portfolio management can be an absolute nightmare to manage if not done and planned accordingly. And we always have this comment that we say is that slow down to speed up. And what we mean by that is that if you plan properly, that you can actually accelerate the project once you start putting shovels in the ground and start, doing the actual construction. So from a portfolio management, and it's not just the people and the software and the technology, but all of the portfolio. It could be down to rebar and concrete and contractors. All of that is very critical for us in how we manage that. And really, if you look at that whole portfolio solution set, you get into a little bit more into detail. That sort of leads you into the next question: is how do we stay compliant and transparent? Because in government projects, they demand high standards and auditability and regulatory compliance. A lot of times that's underestimated as to how deep and how far that has to go. A lot of complexity in there as well. And then also, we talk about from a public transportation perspective as well, and even public sector, perspective. We're commonly dealing with issues around, collaboration across agencies and across even the federal space. So quite common. You'll see any heavy roadwork projects are usually supported by the Army Corps of Engineers, for instance, on the federal side. There's federal funding tied to that, and so it can get very complicated as well from there. And then, finally, another thing I wanted to touch on, Dan, is the ability to look back on these projects. So the ability to report and do analysis and do analytics on these projects is critical to help streamline the process for future. So hopefully that helps sort of shed some light on that.
It does, and usually the way I like to explain it, and this will lead us into kind of the next question, is the ability to take it not only from cradle to grave, but when you talk about regulatory compliance, you also have a lot of these public sector entities that have multiple departments, multiple divisions. You start talking about DOTs where they've got multiple regions that you have to work with, and not each region does the exact same thing or each department does the same thing. And with that, it takes us to, what makes Oracle's construction engineering's Primavera solution uniquely suited for those types of clients that have those multiple divisions, multiple departments, or multiple regions.
Yeah, and it's interesting if you look at legacy systems, a lot of them have been set up where you would just, customer would go set up, and this applies to both public sector as well as private sector customers. But your customer would go and set up an environment, and they would own that server, and they would create data silos and data fiefdoms. And a lot of the times that actually would get in the way of a successful project. And so we see how we sort of have been driving around that. And this is across the portfolio of products, Unify Array connects all the products that Oracle has within its construction engineering portfolio. Is that one of the things we did is that we support an on-premise solution set as customers in legacy environments will have that, but we've elevated that solution set into a cloud environment, a secure cloud environment, FedRAMP certified, ISO, et cetera, across the whole gamut of certifications. And one of the things that's allowed us to do is to take away the daily management of projects and take away the daily management of systems and allow the customers to focus on what's important to them and really proliferate the data across those data silos.
You know what? And that's great information because you and I both been around a long time. And, when I started, you were just getting into web-based products. Everything
Mhm.
was localized, Windows-based, on-premise.
Right.
And, that obviously takes us to what's transpired over the last decade, where everybody is consolidating to the cloud. And that's kind of where my question is, what are the biggest drivers that are pushing these types of agencies towards cloud-based solutions today?
Yeah, and I think it gets down to driving efficiency. I have to almost, hit pause here and tell you a little bit of a background story. I opened up the conversation earlier and said I've been with Oracle a million years, started in the technical side. And I remember when we were first diving into the cloud space, the running joke was, well, hey, isn't it the mainframe world reinvented? Everything's centralized now. Can't we just invent a SKU and call it cloud and we're good? And the answer is no, just because of how it's structured and where the data lives and how access works, and then security around all of that. And I think, what that led to is how do we create a cloud-based solution that is more of a fabric? So it's not, hey, come to the Oracle Cloud and live in the Oracle Cloud. The reality is that customers live in multiple cloud environments and they just want access to their data. They don't care where it lives. They just want secure access to it so they can drive and manage, environments and get the work done they need to get done. And so one of the things that we had to do was really create a fabric within our cloud and across our product suite to allow customers to have that flexible scalability. And you could easily say, well, geez, that's going to drive more complexity in managing the environment. Not necessarily so. I mean, what really that drives is that it's there's been a lot of misconceptions in cloud, but there's also a lot of realities that come with it. And one of the things around management in a cloud environment, and just overall, and I want to shy away a little bit from the word cloud because it's more than that. It's more of a flexible fabric, like I said. But that fabric allows you to shape that data set into whatever you're going to be using, and how you're going to be using it. And so, one of the things that's unique to Oracle is that we have such a long lineage as a database company that we've really focused on the underpinnings of what an enterprise environment should look like and feel like, and that's now been modernized and built into that cloud offering. And so it's led away. It's actually taken away and broken down the barriers of like misconceptions around cloud solutions increasing costs and not delivering return on investment, cloud solutions and performance being unreliable, the way that our data centers and our environments are set up, um, full reliability. There's no real common failure point, if you will, and a lot of it's very robust. And we're finding that once customers who are steeped in the on-premise world and the data silo world, they've lived in that world for so long that once they start getting beyond it, that they can really see the value of a flexible, cloud fabric. And it just, in the public sector space, we saw that probably more prolifically than in a private sector space because, public sector by nature is risk averse. But I think once they adopt and they start to see the value of it and see how this can really really help them be more flexible and get time to market faster, it's really taken off.
Yeah, and there was always certain stopping points, and I don't want to talk bad on IT because IT plays a role everywhere, but
Right.
it was always protections, so to
Yeah.
speak, when you get into the IT world. This is our data, we need to protect it. And I think that umbrella is starting to lift where they're starting to see where cloud SaaS solutions are actually beneficial to them and allow them to do their day in and day out work where before you would have to have somebody specific to manage certain programs that were on premise. So that is good information. And if I remember a million years ago when you started, weren't you, using a chalk line to snap a data date when you were building the houses in Bedrock on the Flintstones?
So I have to laugh. I've literally I went through my own project here recently, and I had to do an unplanned remodel, and I was ripping through my garage, and I found a chalk line. I actually still have a chalk line because before I got into high tech, my first job out of college was doing surveying, and I was taking all the CAD data, and putting it into computer aided systems so they could do plat maps and things like that. But I still had a chalk line, so yeah, it did date back to that far. But it's interesting to see how far it's come. It's also come full circle, and I kind of use this analogy: it's come full circle, but it's elevated, right? And so as it's elevated, it's gotten more and more refined and a lot more intelligent.
That is true. I mean, the first project I worked on, if you were the superintendent, you would walk around the job site with a Palm Pilot making notes. If you were the project manager and your company could afford one, they would have a tough book that they would open up P3
Mhm.
or P6 at the time. P6 was still in its infancy stages to update their schedule. And then we'd walk into the trailer. And when we do our update, you'd have the 24 by 36 Arch D size plot on the wall, and to
Yeah,
do an update, we would snap a chalk line as our data date.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly it. That's
So,
exactly it.
so little bit of I know Oracle's usually a little tough on predictions for down the road, but the one question I always like to ask is, What innovations or strategic priorities are on the horizon for Oracle in this public sector space?
It's really interesting because it gets down, and I don't want to sound buzzwordish, but AI, artificial intelligence, bar none, it's changing things far more than I saw it would. And I'm a kid of the 80s, right? I grew up in the 80s. I mean, the movie Terminator and Skylink, that was my thing. And I was thinking, man, how is this all? You really, it's just kind of like, how's this AI stuff going to work? But what's really cool is I took a class, just because I'm kind of a geek at heart, and I took a little class on AI, and just how it's evolved and how it's structured is fascinating, far more than I thought. And one of the things that I've seen with it is with AI with Oracle, specifically. This is across the Oracle portfolio of products, but with our product set, Primavera product set, and our construction engineering portfolio of products, specifically, AI functionality is built in and being built into the product set to allow you as an administrator and a project manager to work more efficiently, fully functional, fully the full ability to turn pieces of it on and turn pieces of it off depending on what you need to do. And at first, if you look at it, it's a little bit overwhelming. You think, wow, too many bells, whistles, too many knobs and switches I can flip. But as you build your environment, you can start tuning your environment to automate. And so it takes the burden away from the day to day project management. And then you can start isolating things like, hey, flag me if this cost overrun is X% over what our threshold is. And then drill down and let me know where that threshold, where that cost overrun is happening. And so it gives you the ability from a cost management perspective. And then also, I talked earlier about this concept, color of money. No, it's not a movie with Tom Cruise and and Paul Newman in it, although it is. Um, but it's a little bit more so than that because, especially in a public sector space and a federal space, it's critical that they track where the money's coming from, where it's going, and how it's being spent, because it all has to be reported on, which gets back to the analytics piece and that component we talked about earlier. And so that full circle component, as I said, it kind of gets a tighter circle because it elevates and it's evolving. The AI functionality that we're putting into the product set, really deep, probably a whole concept, a whole topic for another podcast that I'm happy to drill into a little bit if you want to go into that in the future. But one of the other things with AI in general is we're seeing a lot of areas that it's really helping, and I can just rattle off a few that I've seen. Is that you know it's allowing us to have more flexibility in expanded government cloud and sovereign cloud services. That's all around specialized government cloud regions and the ability to use AI to manage those environments. And also, I touched a little bit on data analytics, but data analytics and having AI be the engine for that. So that's really where where we're infusing AI and advanced analytics to kind of cross pollinate. And that's in those cloud platforms, you're getting scalability from a cloud standpoint, manageability because it's in a cloud environment, and the IT guys, it takes a burden off of them, but it really allows organizations to gain actionable real-time insights and automate processes, improve decision making, all of that. And then when you filter that over the fact that there's a need for public safety in these environments we're doing, AI is becoming paramount in data analytics. You know, same with digital services and what we call citizen engagement. That's sort of where we're prioritizing platforms that support seamless digital agencies and services between agencies. Um, you look at permitting when you're going to permit an environment. Take the Key Bridge project. You know how many permits are involved in just getting that thing back up and running? It's insane. And to manage all of that on paper would just be daunting. I think you'd have people quit right, left, and center who had to manage those projects. It's just too much. And so the integrated ability to manage digital services via AI and do permitting and grants and and even create a citizen portal to, provide citizens with real-time updates of what's happening. There's all an AI, again, a fabric of AI running in the background of that. And I didn't even get to other topics here like, cybersecurity with AI, hybrid multi-cloud flexibility. That's where you're looking at diverse, cloud environments. Some are FedRAMP, some are not, depending on some are state ramped across, different environments. If the state's getting federal funding, they have to adhere to both federal and state compliance there. Um, and also all of this really, you look at the foundational piece of all of that, AI is really helping Oracle do sustainable and resilient infrastructure. And that infrastructure is a lasting infrastructure that's going to help customers be even that more, that more proactive and that more efficient in the future.
Yeah, and it's funny how you started off the answer to that question where you said you don't want to be buzzwordy, so to speak. And,
Hmm.
a lot of people don't realize because AI has become the buzzword, say, over the last year or 2 years,
Yeah.
obviously with all of these models that are out there for public consumption. And not to date myself, but, or yourself, because you probably remember this, 30 years ago when I got my first computer, and this was in the age of dial-up. We didn't even have DSL before high-speed internet came to evolve. I bought my first gateway, the old spotted cow, tabletop, desktop, whatever you want to call it. And when you fired it up, in the bottom right corner of the screen was a little agent called Ask Jeeves. I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember that or not, but in reality, that was like an AI bot of that time, which was a precursor to Google. And then
Yeah.
obviously now you have your Chat GPTs, your Copilot, your Groks, and so on and so forth. And obviously seeing the benefits of it. I have a colleague that is running, they're actually building their own agentic AI model. And what they're going to do is they're going to take the last 20 years of their projects and build this model to find out where their successes were, where their failures were, where they saved money, and where it cost them a lot of money so they can use those data models for their projects in the future. And I'm very interested in seeing what the output that they get out of this after this model is built and it consumes 20 years worth of data, because that could be a game changer for a lot of organizations. I mean, I've seen models built where that gives you good data, but you have to build the exact same project over and over and over again. But in this type of simulation, you've got 20 years of multiple different types of projects to find out those successes, failures, the under budgets and the over budgets.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And it's interesting because, AI goes, at least what we're seeing, it goes beyond just being a component or a code component within the product set. We're actually generating within within the construction engineering portfolio of products where we're integrating things with cameras for safety. So if you have a big construction site and you can have cameras set up so they can monitor hard hat wearing in critical zones, and so they can literally go and say, hey, we flagged X amount of people not wearing a hard hat in the zone today. Gotta keep it helps with safety functionality from that standpoint. We have an innovation lab that we have in the suburb of Chicago, and we ran a test one time. We can actually in environments where you have like scaffolding set up and ladders going into scaffolding, you can actually set the degree at which the ladder is safely set up, and we can now monitor that and triangulate and say, hey, that ladder's got too steep of a pitch, and that's all being done in real time because of AI. So when you think project management, it goes far beyond just, hey, let's put in something and get the rebar guys to show up before the concrete's poured. It goes farther, much, much farther than that. And it's just fascinating. And then if you look at historically, especially in public sector space, you know, I for the most of my career, I've done private sector. When I went into public sector, I was just fascinated by how much data they have to keep just for liability and legal reasons. Historically, they have to keep everything in these records. And for those customers who are listening to this, if you're not, you better set that up because that's going to be a challenge in the future. Because you have to keep records of all of that. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, right? And the data in the back end of these systems is just growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's for a reason. It's for a very valid reason.
That is true. Yeah. I mean, projects are getting bigger, costs are going higher.
Yeah,
You build a project depending, it could take you 3 months, it could take you 3 years. I mean, hell, we've seen projects. There's a project for my hometown in Buffalo. They started planning in 1978 and they still haven't built it yet. Here we are
correct.
almost 40 years later, and they better get on that one or something's going to happen. But Phil, really appreciate your time today. Excellent. I mean, we could probably go on for hours and hours, but to save time, what we'll do is we'll create more sessions like this in the future where we can dive into
Absolutely.
different topics. And anything you want to say in closing?
No, I appreciate everybody's time today. I hope you've made it this far in the podcast and you're still listening. And like I said, I'm happy to come back on and dive into any other topics you have because, as you can tell, I'm kind of a geek at heart, and the AI stuff just fascinates me to no end. I could talk for hours on that.
Awesome. Really appreciate your time, Phil. And